Welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkins, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. Hello, and welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. I am Amber Larkins, your host, and today I have with me Miss Susan Snow. Susan is an amazing human with a very amazing story. She is a published author, speaker, and coach, and she has definitely lived through trauma, probably more than some of us can even imagine. We're going to hear her story, hear how this has impacted her, and hear how what she's doing today that's really impacting people on a much larger scale. So Susan, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I knew when I first read about your story, I knew that you needed to come on and share, and you're doing such amazing things now. Why don't we just kind of jump into it and share a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your story and the trauma that you've faced?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I am married to a man that was with me from the very beginning. We just celebrated 38 years together, which blows my mind.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. We've had a huge, we've had a ride. It's definitely been a journey. And we have 3 wonderful kids who are all adults now. So got them through the kid stage. Yay. Very close with all 3 of them. And I am very blessed to say that. My story. Well, I grew up with a cop father, and it was, there were some challenges, in the very beginning, especially as I got a little older, with dating and such. He never cleaned his guns around the boys, but he's still like a wee bit intimidating. But he was such a compassionate and present dad. He's just very much, every time he was around someone, he made them feel like they were the most important thing in that room, right? That most important person. When he became a detective, I had a false sense of security. I thought that because he wasn't on the street anymore, that the dangers around being in law enforcement would not apply anymore. He was on his desk, and the worst thing that could happen is he got a paper cut. You know what I mean? It was just not in my mind that something would happen to him. That false sense of security changed on Halloween night of 1985. I was 17 years old at the time, and I had a 6-year-old brother. My dad had testified that day for the case that he was the lead detective on. And the perpetrator had been out on bail while his trial was going on. And so it gave him an opportunity. And what happened was my dad went to go pick my brother up from school, and he was ambushed and murdered. That was in front of my brother, but my dad, his last heroic act was to save my brother's life by telling him to duck down in the truck. After that happened, my mom and I were at home. I wanted to go to a party that night, even though my dad said no earlier that day. I was bound and determined. And my mom she had come home. She was taking off her makeup. She was the Tin Man that year for Halloween. and she was taking off her costume and I was putting mine on when the phone rang. And being a teenager, I thought, well, no one else is going to get a phone call in this house. It's got to be for me. So I ran to the phone and I picked it up. And it was a lady from my brother's school on the other line. And all she said was that there was a drive-by shooting and my dad was involved and nothing else. I handed the phone to my mom immediately and I just had this like pit in my stomach. And I watched my mom talk to this woman and I could kind of hear a little bit of their conversation. My mom's, posture was changing and she was slumping a little bit and got off the phone, looked at me and said, "We're going to the school." So we jumped in the car and the school was about 5 minutes from my mom and dad's house, my childhood home. And we got there and parked the car. The parking lot was kind of in the middle of the school. So the kids would get picked up from the back side of the school, especially after school programs and such. So we got out of the car and started to proceed to the back side of the school when we saw my dad's truck. And my mom and I almost sped walk towards the scene. There was an ambulance and its lights were on, and we got to the truck, and that's when we saw his body partially covered in the aftermath.
Did you guys know approaching the school that he had passed away at
No,
that point?
we had no idea
Not
what
until
we
you
were coming
saw the
into.
only when you saw him on the stretcher did you know it was him?
Yeah, and actually, he wasn't on the stretcher. He was still, because there was still an active investigation, he was still leaning against his truck.
Oh my God.
So as a 17-year-old kid, I could not process what I just saw. Um, they took us back to the office, one of the offices in the school, and my mom was ushered away by some police officers. I had no idea where my brother was. I didn't know if he was hurt. I didn't know what he had seen. And I sat there as she was gone. I sat there alone in the office, and these two ladies were talking. And my conversation in my head was like, why on earth? Like, there was an ambulance there. Why wasn't anybody doing anything about my dad? Why weren't they helping him? Because my brain couldn't process that he was gone. So when I heard these two women talking, the one woman told the other lady that, yeah, Mr. Williams is deceased. And it just snapped in my brain. I was like, oh my God, he's gone. And then all I wanted to do was physically run out of there. I wanted to run and run and run, and make this nightmare go away. My mom came back and she said, "I'm sending you with a neighbor." And even though I wanted to run away, part of me wanted to stay with the unit, with my family. I wanted to know where my brother was. I needed to be with my family, but my mom sent me with the neighbor. So that night, I had to navigate all of these emotions that were coming over me, um, basically with the neighbor and myself. And then I was dating my now husband 3 months when my dad was killed. And so he knew my dad and he was at work. I had the neighbor call him and tell him to come to the house, to the neighbor's house. She apparently didn't tell him everything, and I didn't tell him everything on the phone. So when he showed up, he was like, okay, get your, this was October, so it was a little chilly. So he said, get your jacket and let's go. Let's go to the hospital. What hospital is he at? And, he kept asking me over and over again. And the words could not come out of my mouth. Finally, I looked at him and I said, he's gone. And that was the first time I ever saw my husband, like, fall to his knees. He didn't know. I mean, he was 19 at the time, and neither of us knew how to manage or navigate all of this.
Mm.
Um, and he stayed with me that night at the neighbors and just trying to process all the stuff that was going on. I mean, my life literally changed overnight from the regular home life teenage situation. Far be it that it was perfect, but it was, I had such a close relationship with my dad that he was my world and he was my best friend. And I I didn't know how I was going to live life without him.
That is such a I mean, it's a heart. It breaks my heart to hear it, obviously, because anyone that hears that story thinks of being in that situation, and I don't think you can even imagine. You can only imagine. You can't
Mm.
fully put yourself there unless you've been through something like that. And for a 17-year-old girl to see this, I can't even imagine the types of trauma that now you have to like, not that you ever get over. Some traumas I think you never get over, but this types of trauma that you have to you have to live with the rest of your life. Can you speak to us a little bit about what did that look like?
This was the 80s and there was no conversation around mental health back then. There certainly wasn't any kind of um, support system for children, especially. And so initially, I and my mom, it was a very chaotic night, and everybody deals with grief differently, right? But my mom turtled and went into herself. And the focus had always, from the very get go, had been, and so be it, my brother, obviously, since he was there and he witnessed it. And that's what we learned. I didn't even see my brother until the following day. And that's when I was told that he saw everything happen. And honestly, I mean, even hearing him cry at night, I wanted to go and console him and I wanted to be the big sister that he needed, but I didn't know how to function. I lived in a fog for a very long time with, nothing known about PTSD back then either. I was dealing with all of those different things that happened. So I had anxiety. My security was rocked because the one man who has always been my protector, someone killed him. I had so much anxiety. I had deep dark depression. I had suicidal ideation. I wanted so badly to be with my dad wherever he was. And nobody around me, because of all the focus on my brother and my mother, paid attention, checked in with me, including my own mother. So really the only person that I had at the time were my friends and my boyfriend for the support. But even they didn't know what to say or how to. We were all kids. We didn't have the tools. We didn't have, any way to navigate through this. And LAPD did, about a month in, send us to therapy. Now, I had never thought about therapy. Again, no conversation around mental health. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that because these adults are telling me I have to do it, I have to do it. The other part of me was, oh, this is a professional. Maybe they can fix me. Maybe they can make all this stuff swirling in my head go away. And we all had individual therapists. So my mom went to someone, my brother went to someone, and I went to someone. My therapist initially had conversations around my relationship with my mother, my brother, my school, and my boyfriend. And he never dove. He never asked questions. He never checked in with me either for an entire year. And every week that I saw him, I was just like, "Oh, today's the day, right? He's something's going to change. Something's going to This is a professional. He's going to fix me. He's going to make me feel better." And he didn't for an entire year. I struggled. All of the same stuff, the I struggled with the anxiety and the suicidal ideation and walking in a fog. I was in I was just barely functioning. And about a year after I was started to see him, he looked at me and he said, "You're a well-rounded young lady and you're very strong and you're going to be fine for the rest of your life. I don't need to see you anymore." And I was like, "Oh, wait a minute. What? No, like, I'm a mess. How can I be fine?" I didn't I didn't know how to verbalize at the time, and I just thought, "Okay, well, that just means that I'm crazy. I've just snapped, and this is all the things that I'm just gonna have to deal with for the rest of my life. Because clearly, a professional can't help me." And that was my mindset.
This breaks my heart because I think from talking to different people who've been through different types of trauma, that loneliness of feeling like I'm the only one going through this, and truly in probably in that circle, you may be. I know when I was having, I mean,
Mhm,
like I had my own trauma, nothing like yours, but it was, when I was having suicidal ideations, I felt alone. And this
mhm.
is a big issue. And I am very grateful that mental health is spoke about more these days because people don't have to feel that. But I can only imagine how detrimental that was for him to say that. Do you think that this was maybe because LAPD was the one, they were like government or funded through the police department, that he just was like, they don't, I don't want to say they don't care, but they don't, there's
I
not a
think
huge
that's part of
focus.
it for sure. I also feel like that wasn't that part of, therapy or being a therapist. I I feel like maybe he was intimidated by the situation because it was so intense that he didn't know how to fix me. He didn't know, or maybe he was afraid to have those conversations because maybe he felt like he might have been over his head in his own education. You know what I mean? So I don't know what the reasons were, and I have forgiven him for sending me on my way, so to speak, because that could have been the issue, is that he just wasn't educated enough to handle the type of trauma that I was experiencing. So, but I will tell you that, I struggled for 14 years of my life with all of these things and not being medicated, not having therapy. I was undiagnosed. And like I said, I just felt like I was crazy and this is just the way it was going to be. Well, I thought I was going to have to be that way for the rest of my life. And what I got really good at was masking. And I talk to a lot of people about this, and a lot of people who have gone through trauma mask. Um, they pretend they're fine. Well, this doctor told me I was well rounded and I was strong. So that is the mask I'm going to wear, right? So I'm not going to let anyone know all the turmoil that's going on inside of me. I think the only person that recognized that was my boyfriend then. And he didn't know what to do with it either, right? Because he's a kid himself. So it was the blind leading the blind, so to speak. It was We were both trying to function. We were both but I was living in fight or flight and a lot of times freeze mode for 14 years. And we moved to Colorado and we were married. We got married and we had 2 kids. We had 2 children and we moved to Colorado and in 97, and 2 years later Columbine happened. And when Columbine happened, I was working as a hairdresser at the time, and I had left my client the chair to process and went to the back of the room where we had our little TV set up in our break room, and I popped on the TV, and the coverage of Columbine happened. And I stood there and I watched the TV along with my colleagues, but I was having flashbacks. I was having a panic attack. I was turning white, sweating, and I had no idea what was happening to me. My colleague looked at me and said, "Do you know anyone there, or do you have kids there, or do you live in that neighborhood in Littleton?" And I said, "No, I don't know what's happening to me." And she didn't know my story. So I was completely confused on top of having this visceral reaction to what I was seeing. And what I was seeing was the scene that I saw the night my dad was killed. The ambulances, the police officers, the kids were around my same age. And now they're going through trauma. Now I'm recognizing, oh my gosh, their life is upside down. So all of these things were just swirling in my head. And I had to get back to my client. So I put my mask back on and I went and I finished the day like nothing ever happened. But when I walked through the door to go home, that's when I started to spiral. It was the fogginess again. It was the anxiety. It was the suicidal ideation. I had fantasies of just driving off the road. And I was in a very dark place. And my husband actually recognized it, met me at the door and said, "You have 2 choices. You either get help or I'm putting you in a hospital." So I got help. I went to the doctor. Doctor put me on antidepressants because that's what they do. And the next thing that came out of his mouth is, "Now you need to find a therapist." I thought,
Your husband said
again?
this?
My husband sent me to the doctor. The doctor said
Said
that
you
to
need a
me. "You need
therapist.
to find a therapist." And I was like, tried that. Didn't work. Probably won't work again. Like, I'm broken. I'm fractured. I'm crazy, right? So I knew that my husband was serious, right? So I was going to do whatever I needed to do. Plus, I was a mom now. And so I did see a therapist, and she opened my eyes. She listened to my story. I told her a little bit about what I had gone through at 17 and what I was experiencing currently. And she looked at me and she said, "Susan, everything that you have experienced at 17 years old since then is absolutely normal. You have PTSD." And I tell people it was like the sky opened up and rainbows shot out because I finally had answers. And now I know I'm not crazy. So it was a big eye opener for me. But when she said PTSD, initially I was like, wait a minute. I didn't go to war. I wasn't in the military. I wasn't a first responder. So how is it that I have PTSD? And she said, well, anyone who goes through anything traumatic can experience PTSD. What you need to know is that PTSD isn't something that goes away. You can manage it. And it opened my eyes. From there on, I knew that I had this person that was going to be able to guide me in the directions that I needed to go to navigate the different things that come from PTSD, such as the anxiety and the suicidal ideation, the deep depression, that kind of stuff.
Wow. So this therapist was almost like an epiphany moment for you, where you
Oh
finally had
gosh.
answers for what you were going through.
Yes. It was a turning point for sure. At the time, I thought, oh my gosh, now I can start my healing journey because now I have someone who can guide me. I'm not alone in this. And that was really important. I felt a connection to her because she was the first person that listened to me and was really present in where I needed her to be. Whereas the first therapist I had was very clinical and very questions were very shallow, and very generalized. I should say it was more like a generalized type therapy session. So
Mhm.
she was like, okay, this isn't going to be an easy road, but we're going to do this together and you're going to have to do the work. I'll guide you, but you're going to have to do the work,
So
which was
can you
absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, I bet. Can you take us a little bit down that journey of what that work kind of consisted of for you? I mean, I know it's no overnight thing.
So I talk about this so much, but the littlest thing, she said, we've got a long road. So let's start out with something simple that you can do that makes an impact. And I said, okay. So she started me on journaling. And she said, Susan, she said, you can pick your modality. So if it's writing or art or music, all of those things are considered journaling. And what that means is for me, I took writing. So writing, uh, she handed me a pad of paper or like a notebook. And she said, I want you to journal in this every time you start having those bad thoughts. And I want you to journal it out.
Mhm.
And what she explained to me is that journaling is almost a reprogramming of your brain. So once you put things, you take it out of your brain and you put it on paper, it's almost like a release.
Mm.
And it doesn't happen overnight either.
Mhm.
And initially, I felt kind of dumb. Like, I felt kind of stupid. Like, this is dumb. What am I doing? Right.
Mhm.
And I think everyone who's ever tried journaling kind of has that feeling initially like, really, is this really going to happen? But what I started to see is that I started to be able to sleep better at night because the one thing she did say is to start journaling before you go to bed. Because I don't know if you're the same, but the minute I start to like relax, my brain pops up and all those things start swirling around in my head. So she said, journal before you go to bed. So I started to do that and I started to sleep better because I didn't have all that stuff swirling around in my head.
What were you journaling?
I was just journaling all the bad thoughts that were in my head.
Kind of the same thing every night you would just journal about whatever was in your mind. No
Mhm.
prompts or anything.
Yeah, then that was initially. Then she started saying things like, "Okay, so now what I want you to do is start journaling what were the good things that happened that day?" And that's what I would journal because when you're grateful and you can see the positive in the day, it does change your mindset. So I started doing that. Then down the road, we started talking about what are the things that I can do for the anxiety because I would still wake up with panic attacks. And she started to teach me tapping techniques and affirmations. So I would tap my hand my heart, and use affirmations. It would calm me and it would ground me. She said the function of the physical with the verbal trains the brain and starts to calm it down. So that's what I started to do. So I did some tapping. When I was highly, highly anxious, that's when she started to teach me breathing techniques and breath work. So I've kind of dabbled in all of that. And then I did some EMDR as we started to understand more about EMDR. Now, she didn't do EMDR therapies, so she sent me to someone who did. And I did some sessions in EMDR. Very powerful. Utilized the paddles with the electronic pulses that go back and forth. It was a terrifying experience. I tell anyone, like, really strap yourself in, because this is where you really have to do the work, because you are diving right back into that trauma.
Can you share a little
And
bit about what EMDR is? I know we've talked about it here on the podcast before, but
mhm,
I'm not sure I fully even understand exactly what it is. I've heard it's powerful.
it
Can you?
is. So it's retraining the brain using, people utilize it, depends on the therapist, really. My therapist used these like paddles that I would hold on to. And anytime when we started to go into the experience of the night I saw my dad, these paddles would send electronic pulses back and forth. And so it's almost like your brain is, um, when it starts to dive into that trauma, the physical of the pulses sends your brain in a different direction.
Hmm.
So it's a physical reaction, because honestly, when you have PTSD, your brain has been damaged. And the damage doesn't go away, but you're reprogramming your brain
Hmm.
with these sensory, what between the sensory and what the mind is thinking at the time. And anytime I got really scared, where I started to pull back a little bit, she would have me visualize my happy place, and I would go back there. So she wouldn't leave me in my trauma. She would take me back to a place where I felt at peace. It was an incredible experience. You have to do it to, like, there's nothing I could do to describe it. You have to experience it for yourself.
Yeah.
It's diving. It's really being in that place again. And most people don't want to go there, right? That is the most vulnerable you could ever be, as in raw, in that state. So most humans don't want to run towards pain,
Mhm.
and they hold back. And getting back to the therapist part, if you're doing this is one of the messages that I try to put out there. If you are moving towards doing these things and really doing the work, it is absolutely imperative that you have a therapist that 100% that you can be vulnerable with. Because if you don't have that trust that you can be vulnerable with this person, you're not going to heal wholly. You're just not, because you're going to hold back. And if you hold back, you're not really moving through your pain. So I try to tell people, there's this misconception that once you find a therapist, or once your uh, insurance sends you to somebody, that you're stuck with that person. And that's not the case.
Mm-mm.
You have to find who works for you. And it could take 4 different therapists. But here's the thing. I've talked to people that have stayed in therapy for like months and every time kept thinking it's going to get better. And I tell them, you initially, when you have that interview, and I mean interview, like interview that therapist. Is that going to be the right fit for you? You'll know in the first session. You'll know if you have a connection. You'll know if you feel comfortable enough where you know that down the line, when you have to be the most vulnerable, this person is going to be able to guide you.
Mhm.
So don't waste your time. It may take you 3 therapists to find the perfect one, but it's worth it. Because why do we pay these people? Why do we go there in the first place? Is to heal.
Mhm.
So,
And it's like this with anything, really. I mean,
yeah.
when I was having issues with my eye and I had to go see an eye doctor, and I had to go through 4 doctors before I could find the eye doctor that could truly treat what was wrong with my eye. Um,
Yep.
Same thing with, I mean, I come out of the fitness industry. You're looking for a personal trainer. You're
Right.
looking for whoever you're looking to guide you and lead you.
Mhm.
You have to find that right person. And it's
Mhm.
okay to not align with someone. It doesn't make them a
Exactly.
bad person. Just don't align
No.
with them.
Right. Exactly. I think with mental health, though, there's just a little bit of a difference, and that's just the fact that I think the mindset is that this person knows what the heck they're doing, and no matter what, they're going to be able to fix me or, be able to help me. And that's not always the case. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just really important. And I think for myself, initially I had a thought about writing a book, but I wasn't like 100% because I have no idea how to write a book. I had no idea. And at the same time, I needed to be in a place. I had done a lot of work throughout the years in the different modalities, and I had to get to a space in my brain where I was like, okay, I'm strong enough to tell my story. But I always knew that it was important for me to tell my story, and that was part of that was the fact that always felt like I was not as important in the scenario. I was kind of pushed aside, and I mean, even in the very beginning, like the media took 2 days for them to figure out he had a teenage daughter. And I had 17 years with the man. You know what I like so it was hard. It was hard. I had my mom who pushed me aside. I had, people around me who weren't checking in. And so I felt like it was important for me to get my story out. There were a lot of misconceptions as well about how I should have reacted to certain things throughout the years or how I should have felt about certain things. And I was like, no, I need to tell my story so people know who I am and not to believe the story they've put in their head. So that started my journey at 50. I don't know what it is about 50, but you turn 50 and all of a sudden, like, you're like, I gotta, you know, change the world. I don't know what it is, but at 50, I said, you know what? I drew a line in the sand and I said, this thing has to happen. I've got to write this book.
And now you're an author.
And now I'm an author. And, it took me 4.5 years to write the book. Part of the reason that it took me 4.5 years is that I had a lot of fear around writing the book. I had a lot of fear of obviously security issues. Um, I had fear around me telling my truth and having it hurt family members in the process. I had fear that it was going to hurt my husband in some sort of way. What I had to realize is as I was writing my story, as I was diving deep, and there were days where I was just done. Like once I started to write, I was like, I'm done. I have nothing. I have no energy. I can't handle clients right now. I just need to give myself some grace. Every time I felt that fear, though, I put purpose in front of me. And what I realized is that the purpose on the other side of this is not only to help myself and be cathartic to myself, but I knew that somehow, some way, I would be able to help others through my experiences and through my words.
Mm.
And so every time that fear would start to well up in me, I would think of my purpose and it would just drive me forward. So I have this tagline, bulldoze your fear, because that's what I had to do. Every time it showed up, I had to bulldoze through it. And I'm glad that I did, because the book it's not an easy read, but it's definitely an important read. My message is very clear in the book.
Who do you have in mind when you're writing this book? Is it the person who doesn't feel seen, or is it the person who maybe in any regards is going through some type of trauma? Or who did you really have in mind?
I think the book is for everyone, honestly. Definitely anyone who's gone through trauma in their life or is experiencing loss. I'll give you an example of this.
Mhm.
This is when my purpose shows up, it shows up in a big way. So last weekend, I was having a yard sale, and these things happen in like random situations. So I was having a yard sale and I was selling this vase that had some silk flowers in it, some beautiful white and other colorful like flowers. Two women showed up to my sale. One, they were a mother and a daughter. The daughter was probably in her 40s. And then the older mom, and the mom kept circling my flower vase. And she asked me, I wanted to sell the vase with everything in it, but she said, would you be willing to part with just these flowers? And I said, sure, that's fine. And her daughter says, well, tell her why you want those flowers, Mom. Tell her your story. And I thought, here we go. So the mom said, I just lost my daughter, my youngest daughter, suddenly. We just had her celebration of life, and I had some beautiful blue was her favorite color, flowers, and these white flowers of yours would go perfectly with my memorial flower arrangement that I want to put together for her. And I said, oh, that is beautiful. That's amazing. And I'd be honored. And she looked at me and with tears in her eyes, she said, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how I feel at loss. I don't know how to deal with this. I'm crushed. And she started to cry. And I said, hold on a minute. I have something for you. And I went in the garage and I picked out my book and I brought it over and I handed it to her. And I said, I wrote this book and I hope that it helps you find peace and hope. And I told her my story, a snippet. And I said, I know that you don't believe this now because your heart is just crushed, but you will get through this. And I hope that you find peace when you read my book. And she just grabbed onto me and started to cry on my shoulder. And she backed up after we stopped embracing, and the daughter was standing there with tears in her eyes. And she said, now I know why we came to your yard sale today. We needed to come here. And I said, yep, yes, absolutely, 100%. And the mom was like, I can't wait to read your book. And So we left it at that. But that's things that show up for me all the time. And it reminds me that that is my purpose,
Mhm. Mhm.
is to help anyone who has dealt with loss, trauma, all of that.
Well, that story is very impactful. I mean, I believe everyone has a purpose. It's obviously up to us to find that purpose and
Yep,
to exercise it in a sense that we get better at doing what we're put on this earth to do. And I don't
yep,
believe that any pain is wasted. I think that
no,
we live in a world where pain we go through pain, but
yeah,
that's not wasted because I believe in God and I believe God puts us in direct relation and contact and crossing our paths with people that need our story and need to hear what we
exactly.
have to share. Man, what you're doing is amazing and it takes a lot of courage for someone to share a story like this and to to be vulnerable enough to open up because it's heart wrenching to have to tell this story again and again and again and relive this again and again. But I truly believe that you have found your purpose. And I believe that you're living in your purpose. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing.
I feel blessed that I'm able to do this. I didn't think in a million years that I would be in this space. You're right. Everyone does have a purpose, and purpose on the other side of fear will allow you to push forward, right? So that's why I say bulldoze your fear, you know, um, because fear holds us back from everything in life, right?
Mhm.
If we don't heal within ourselves, we tend to, we can hurt people around us. We can not be present in our relationships. We can take out things with our colleagues, make everything personal. And so I feel like this is an important message is, healing yourself should be your absolute priority because the ripple effect of you healing yourself is immense. For me, I have a legacy that's a little over the top. However, in writing my book, I felt like this is my legacy for my kids. This is what I want to leave them with, that no matter what life throws at you, if you heal yourself, you will be able to move through it. But you got to do the work and you can't be afraid of it. The freedom on the other side of your pain when you do that work is indescribable.
Mhm.
And for me, I do feel like I'm living in my purpose. And the universe just keeps putting it in front of me over and over and over again. And that's kind of why I have moved into the life coaching realm because I feel like once somebody has gone through therapy, now what? Now that I've healed or I'm in my healing journey, what's my next steps? What do I need to do to really start to learn to live in my purpose, whatever that
Mhm.
is,
Mhm.
And speaking too, speaking on stage, man, oh man, my biggest goal in life, and my friends always pick on me and they say, "Oh my gosh, I think my lunch is right about here because you just said your biggest goal is to be in front of 10,000 people on a stage." And I say, and that's because if I can get this message out to 10,000 people, but I'm able to change one person's life in those 10,000, I've done my job.
Mhm.
I've
Mhm.
done what I've set out to do. And so, but my friends think I'm absolutely crazy for wanting to talk to 10,000 people.
But this is the thing too. When you have a calling like that, or like this is the thing, you're in your purpose. I honestly believe that you can't rest until you are working towards that purpose. Like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's relentless in your heart. It won't let you stop. You're an amazing person, and I'm positive you're an amazing coach because your demeanor
Thank
and
you.
the way that you speak, and it's powerful just hearing you. So tell us really quick, because I know we're getting there right in an hour, but tell us, what is the best way to reach out to you if they are going through something like this and they want coaching or they want your book? Where can they
Yeah,
find you?
absolutely. So, my book is available on Amazon. It is called The Other Side of the Gun: My Journey from Trauma to Resiliency, and it's in paperback form. It's a short but sweet, short, sweet, and to the point book. So 188 pages. Very quick read, but very powerful. It's also on Kindle form. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read the book that way. I am working on getting it out in audio form, but I'm going to be doing that myself. So that's a whole different animal. And I do have a website. It's called susansnowspeaks.com. Pretty simple. If anybody is interested, needs to talk to me, wants to know a little bit more, has questions, whatever, they can contact me through the website. My email is the same. It's susansnowspeaks@gmail.com. I have a YouTube channel now that I just started. I'm trying to do all of this technical stuff by myself. And it is a lot. So that one, same thing. Susan Snow Speaks is my YouTube channel. And I will have my podcasts on there. I also have some of my speaking on there as well. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
as many
And
stages as I can get out there and get this message out, I would be honored to
yeah.
be able to
Well,
do that.
and all of these things will be in the show notes. For those of you who are listening, you can always go to the show notes and you'll see all of these things listed as well. Man, Susan, you are an amazing human. Thank you for all you're doing for those, because I know that, it's so unfair to see someone suffering through and feeling like there's no hope. So
Yep.
you are giving people hope. Um, Tell us, is there any last takeaways that you'd like to just leave us with?
Sure. So if you're listening and you are in this um, journey, or you don't know how to start this journey, one thing you need to know is that you aren't alone in this. And I think the best thing and the biggest lesson that I had was to take off my mask and stop pretending everything is okay and that you're strong. And because it's not weakness to be vulnerable, it's actually being brave and taking that first step. So if you're in that point in your life, you want to make sure that you're dealing with someone who is a professional and that could speak to the specific thing that you are dealing with. Um, Make sure that they specialize in that, and it's not just a general type doctor. I think that's really important because it's the way that you're going to be able to heal the most efficiently way and clear way, and to learn how to navigate all the things that are going on with you internally in your mind. So um mental health is absolutely the most important thing, and it affects everything, even your physical being.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's it. You need to
Yeah.
be able to be bulldoze that fear.
Hmm. And you don't have to go through this alone.
No,
That's my biggest thing from hearing Susan talk today. If I'm talking to anybody that's listening today, you don't have to go through this alone. There are people, there's help, there's resources, and I hope that I can provide those. Susan can provide those, and you can find the help that you really need, but don't suffer along through this.
talk to somebody, and especially if you are, there are suicide hotlines out there for a reason, and that's to remind people that when you're in that dark place, that there are resources out there. You aren't alone, and those people do care about your well-being, and even family members, that you trust and love. You know, there is nothing that says that you're weak if you reach out to get help. So talk to somebody. Don't sit in the silence alone, and don't sit in that dark cavern alone, because there is light. Is someone with a flashlight that will guide you out of that place.
Mhm.
And I've been there. I have felt those feelings, and it will get better. Even though you don't believe it, it will get better. So you just got to know that you're not being weak by asking for help.
Mm. That's so good. Thank you so much. Thank you for that, and just for everything that you're sharing and everything you're doing. I know I can't wait to see what kind of impact you're going to make through your story, and just through your courage and your strength and your fearlessness. So, thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Susan.
Thanks for having me, Amber. I appreciate the time here.
Thank you for listening to Through the Trauma podcast. If you have found value in this episode or believe in the mission behind what we are doing, please subscribe so that you never miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our transformation project at transformationthroughtraumaproject.com, where we help inspirational stories get heard on a larger scale through multiple platforms. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Until next time.